Whenever a discussion like this comes up, it's often phrased in the context of personal behavior. Like I think people will be assuming that where we're going to get up to is like this push to make you vegetarian. And I happen to have been vegetarian. I grew up a Hindu, and so I've like never eaten meat. And then I just stayed a vegetarian after I was no longer a Hindu. But then I started prepping to interview you, and I'm like, fuck, this might... I don't know how valuable this is, especially if you look at some of these online charity evaluators, and you're just like, $1 of your donation will offset this much meat eating. And you're like, what are we doing here? But anyways, vegetarianism overrated?
I think we made a mistake as a movement,
Yes.
making this about personal diet.
Right.
I think it's great when folks want to make a personal diet decision, whether that is eating less meat or meat from more humane sources. But the focus should not be on the individual. This is not how large-scale social change occurs. I think we need government reform. I think we need corporate reform. And people can be a part of that regardless of what they eat, regardless of what their diet is. I think that we need people to be advocates and funders and supporters of this cause.
So how did we end up in this position where so much, I think when people think about animal welfare, they think PETA, they think of like protests which are encouraging individuals to give up meat consumption. At the same time, these charities which are so effective at corporate or policy change are just like so neglected. How did this end up being the landscape of animal welfare activism and funding?
Yeah, I think it's a puzzle. I mean, it seems so obvious that you can have far larger scale change at the level of governmental change and corporate change. And instead, we get fixated about whether someone is completely vegan or vegetarian or like. And I think what happened is when people started learning about this issue initially, it was just a few people, and they felt totally powerless to achieve larger scale change. And so they understandably focused on themselves. And then it started to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It started to become an end in itself, where it was about personal purity as much as about the impact you're having on the issue. And it's much easier to measure your own personal purity than it is to measure your total impact on reforming factory farming. And so I think it just became this kind of inward focus. And the good news is I think that has changed tremendously in the last decade. I think the movement has gone from being one that was obsessed with personal purity, obsessed with dietary choices, to one that is much more obsessed with impact.
Okay, so this is why I really wanted to do this episode, which is I think people will be aware that there's a general problem here, but the actual politics and the actual economics, the actual state of the technology landscape here, there might be interventions which are stupendously effective, which would overlook just because people are not aware of what's actually happening in the space. So on that point, to use an analogy from global health and poverty, the Against Malaria Foundation estimates that it saved on the order of 180,000 lives or something, which is a lot. But then you compare it to China liberalizing brought 1 billion people out of poverty. That's just like a many, many orders of magnitude bigger impact. In animal welfare, do you have some like big take about what the China liberalizing equivalent in this space is?
Yeah, I think there have been 3 large-scale drivers of progress so far. So the first has been government policy. So advocates got the European Union to set basic animal welfare standards. That is billions of animals every year. Billions every year. Then there's corporate reforms. And we see the same thing, that there's this incredible scale across these corporate supply chains. I mean, McDonald's just implemented its pledge to go cage-free in the US. That alone is 7 million hens every year out of cages just in the McDonald's supply chain. And then the third lever is technology. One example would be sexing as a new technology that can get rid of the need to kill male chicks in the egg industry. The unwanted chicks are killed at birth. And sexing has already spared about 200 million chicks from that fate. So there are these giant drivers, and the good news is we're just getting started with them. There is the potential, I think, to help tens of billions of animals through these drivers.
If you enjoyed this clip, you can watch the full episode here and subscribe for more clips. Thanks.